right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for all coming out to our regular Board of Finance meeting. If you would all please rise and join us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, starting off with roll call. Don Cavelli.
Here.
David Saros. Here. Travis Irons and Scott Gardner are excused absence. Scott Charlton. Here. Ted Dumaine.
Yeah.
And Gary Stalin.
He's on a cruise.
Very good. For the record, Mr. Saros, you have voting rights for the meeting. All right. Next item, acceptance of the minutes from the August 21st, 2019 meeting. Minutes have been sent out and distributed. Any questions, discussion?
Move we accept them.
We'll second it.
Okay, a motion and second to accept the minutes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to accept the minutes. All right, next item under new business. Item A, update from the Board of Education regarding the $64,000 ECS cut by the state. So for those of you who were at our last Board of Finance meeting, you probably remember that that was something that we were going to follow up with. It was mentioned, actually added on to the agenda for preliminary discussion, but we did not have any update at that time, and plus our chair for the Board of Ed and our superintendent were not present at last month's meeting. So as a follow-up, we put it on this month's meeting, so at this time I'd like to recognize the chair of the Board of Education, Christy Haskell.
Good evening. All right, so the budget continues, and as you know, the state's ECS state aid to Plainfield was cut by $114,000. We took the $50,000 reduction, but that still leaves the $64,000. So we had, Mr. Sinkowitz had reached out and asked for an update regarding that. So we kind of went through what the options would be, and currently, you know, the Board of Education in good faith has followed through with the budget. This past year, when we were over by the $500,000 that we had to give back because of the MBR violation, we in fact gave $558,000 back. So we try to work very well and communicate with the town. But with that, I will introduce Mr. DePietro to explain further about the items that we've discussed.
So good evening. There are some papers here that we gave out, and if you get one, because I know you have. So if you would allow me the opportunity, I put it in writing because there's some information, and not everyone has the same frame of reference from the history. As Mrs. Haskell said, we actually realized a $114,000 reduction in ECS state aid. In the May vote that was taken by the town on the referendum, we had asked for $35,980,000, but that was defeated. So when we came back, we all agreed we would take $50,000 out, which they did. So our current budget is $35,930,000, $50,000 less than last year. And the first question the Board of Finance asked, does this challenge MBR? So up on bold, we said that, you know, being cut $50,000 in a year when the ECS is being cut $114,000 does not constitute an MBR violation. So the first question is, there's no problem with the cut that was made. And the second question is, now there's a $64,000 revenue shortfall on the part of the state to the town. How might that be addressed? So in bold, on number 6, which is where I'd be starting, the question before the Board of Finance is to determine if the town appropriation to the Plainfield schools should be sustained as it is, $35,930,000, or reduced by $64,000. And they've asked us to discuss that $64,000. Certainly the Board of Education would ask to leave that money intact. The reason being that if the taxpayers voted the $35,930,000 and they knew that that was the appropriation, what that was requested, and that that was justified by where the money would be spent, we'd hope that that would be able to hopefully be supported by the town. But we know that there are at least three options. You either require the Board of Ed to cut 64,000, and then any cut more than 50,000 would have to go before the taxpayers, and for a vote, anything 50,000 or more, so that would be a vote. And then if you cut that money, I'm assuming that money then has to go back to the taxpayers. It would not be taken from the central. The second one would be allow it to remain as it was voted in. And there is a third option, because that happened last year, where you could leave the money but ask us not to expend it, like we did with the 550, and basically return that back to the town at the end of the year. And there's a reason why I put the third option, because you'll understand there's some new laws in place that may help the Board of Finance and the town. So the front page basically says, this is not to have you make that decision, just tell you these are the three things that seem to be the appropriate option. So on the second page, look at the first option, reducing it. Basically, if the Board of Finance determines that that reduction should be made to the appropriation of the school department knows its responsibility. The Board of Education would hold a meeting and discuss where the $64,000 could come from. It's so early in the year, I can tell you today that we probably might have that opportunity in salaries with people who are taking maternity leaves. But we originally believed when we had this conversation that the solar and LED would return $60,000. The good news is it's actually going to return about $30,000 because two schools were completed, Shepherd Hill and Moosehead. So we'll explain that in a minute, But in general, please know that the school has always, as required, if you reduce the budget by $64,000, that's fine. We would demonstrate where we think we could take the money as least impact to student learning. And then the new budget would be on that number 9, $35,866,347. That would be the new number, and that would be the new MBR for next year. So right now it's $35,930,000. If you cut it 64, it'll be $35,866,000. In the spirit of trying to be very open, that's what happens. You cut the budget, that's your new MBR, which means minimum budget requirement. That means that's how much you have to put in the subsequent year. Now, if you allow it to remain as is, then the budget just stays $35,930,000, and that's the MBR for the next year. So there's a difference. The last one, number 11, says if you require the BOE to just underexpend, do not expend the $64,000, do everything in your power to keep that, leave the money in the budget. Well, then as demonstrated in the past fiscal year, when the town did increase by the money needed, we actually gave back more money. We gave back approximately $3,000 to $5,000 more than was granted by the voters. So we actually gave back $558,464. In fact, we just didn't spend it. We didn't save anything. We just promised we wouldn't spend it. And when you get the money in June, you can't spend it by July. So we all knew that. There's no surprise. We didn't do any magic. We were able to save a little bit more money from our regular budget. So those are the three options. Cut it, leave it, or request that it be underexpended. And the reason, again, for that is the new law, and I'll go into that in a minute, but the new law does allow now, not just 1%, but the state regulations allows the town, any town, to hold in a restricted set-aside account up to 2% of the school budget, set aside strictly for the school. It can't be used for anything else. So if we have a $35 million budget, Plainfield can, at the end of the year, reserve $70,000 and put it into a restricted set-aside so that if you do need that for the next fiscal year for the budget, you would put that as a cost offset to the taxpayers. In other words, it's like putting the money in the bank and just hold it there. The other option is you have to go back to the taxpayers and ask them to cut the budget, which you can do. So number 12 basically tells you what happened this year. So far in this current year, we were hopeful that the LED and solar projects would result in $64,000. And it's very real that that would happen because the only two schools that were fully converted to solar are Moosehead Elementary School and Shepherd Hill, and they go live at the end of October. As of January, we looked at last year's and current year's energy usage, what the bill is. We're going to go down to 6.2 cents per kilowatt. Not the transmission. Transmission is the same cost, but we go from 8.5 cents to 6.2, and the savings on those two schools alone, on the energy we currently generate last year, and we're seeing currently the same, would come up to about $31,000. So there would have been truly $65,000 to $70,000 saved if we could have done all the buildings. Not the fault of the town, not the fault of schools, the forefront, which we just had to tell them they're gonna have to extend this till next summer. We just can't disrupt student learning. So I believe that the solar and the LED, which is unique, if anybody's been following the LED project was supposed to be cost neutral. We're gonna take out a loan, and the money that you save pays for it. We're still trying to figure this one out. Every school's doing that except Shepherd Hill. Shepherd Hill's running more money saving than the loan, which is good. But it looks like we're gonna generate anywhere $10,000 to $15,000 for the year in LED. So we're gonna watch that to see how that happens. That's a good thing. And we counted for that as part of the savings right now. The rest is coming from the solar savings of Shepherd Hill. So we thought we would have been able to come tonight and just say, without changing anything, we never budgeted to save money on solar. We didn't know what we would save. It's not even in place yet. But we estimated that it would be about 64. And if they were all converted, we probably would just tell you the money would be saved. Again, do you want to cut it or just put it in the reserves at the end of the year? One way or the other. That's your choice. Number two, however, on the other side, special ed has always been that challenge, and I'm here to tell you that while we know that 4 students have come in with placements, I'm not here to tell you warning, because we all know that 4 students come in and somewhere across the term of the year, we're trying to bring 4 more students back, and there could be people who move out. So this is not, oh, you gotta give us that money because we're $250,000, right now, we're worried about it. The reality is we are looking at that $250,000, but while there are 4 students that could be placed in the next month, there are 4 students in 8th grade we're trying to move back into our Pathways program, and that would save approximately $40,000 per student. That's already placed outside. They cost about $60,000. There's some money to run the program, so we could actually save about $150,000, $160,000. We believe that we're gonna monitor that money like we always do, and we'll keep our budget under wraps. So I just want you to know that every year it gets difficult. We want it to be honest that we save some money with the solar, but we also want to be honest that right now we're looking at, that special ed shortfall. I just believe that being in the business 47 years, there will be some offset to that, so don't get panicked. The 2 factors above just suggest that, what should we do? If we were to also cut the 64,000, it just adds a dimension of fiscal responsibility to us to keep making the cuts. So our hope is that you look at number 13, the new factor, and by the way, I gave you the law, I copied it for you, or the interpretation law. The change to the state law increased the amount of the unexpended school budget funds that can be placed in a restricted set aside. And it can be used at a future date. What this provides for the town is the option that if we didn't expend $50,000, $60,000, up to $70,000, you could put that money into an account, and once you know that that money is there, when you're building your budget for next year, you can say, well, we know this is going to be $60,000, so if you needed $360,000, we only need to give you $300 because the other $60,000 is going to be coming from a fund. You just basically keep that as a cost offset for the following year. The limit is 2%. If you look at $35,930,000, if you look at $36 million, it would be $72,000. I estimated it low at $70,000. Are we okay with this so far? I know I'm pretty fast, but okay, we're good? Okay. Number 14, if you look at it, we just think that if you think of the things above, the vote by the voters was $35,930,000, $347. It does not require a new vote if you leave it in place. It would not reduce the appropriation. The cut that's happening is related to revenue, not appropriation. We defended the need for $35,930,000. It's really a revenue, and it's not because of unsubstantiated costs. It's for very real costs that we know that exist. With the change in the law, basically, without having to go back and ask the people to vote or to cut the budget, you virtually can let the people know that by leaving the money as they appropriated it, if the money is under-expended, it's still there for the public. I do want to show you 2 pieces of evidence. If you just turn the page to the budget, you'll see that The budget we have was $35,930,000. You can look at the last row, the last two rows. And we took the two solar power savings that we believe that are pretty much predictable, and we're gonna have that money. And we applied that to a little reduction in the substitutes of paras, because we found that we needed more paras this year. And I know that it says non-certified employee salary, 112, 3 down, you see the number 51,000. It was 5,000,001, we got it down to 4,000,008, it went up a little bit to 4,000,009. We believe that the para substitute is rising because of some of the children that are coming to us, and they need support. In one school, there were 18 restraints in 3 weeks. We had a child that we had to call police for because got out of the building, and sadly, this child was asking the police for help. We needed to get support. We have things that are just happening, and one of the things we need to do is make sure there's enough physical persons, employee help, to just make sure these children can be safe. So we put those people, and we'll take care of that. We will find the money that we have to, because we'll do what we need for every child. I just wanted to show you that we're keeping our budget flat and zero, that where we see money savings, we then will put it towards things that we think will help students. And then finally, in the documentation, if you look at that 4th page, these are the new laws that relate to the MBR. The first one is they extended the MBR for the next 2 fiscal years, so we know that that's in place. And then it now allows for a 5-year look back. So instead of only looking at 2 years and saying, well, you have a little drop in enrollment, you can look at 5 years and decide if you think there needs to be more of an adjustment to the budget, which again helps the town, not the schools, unless it rose, then it can help us, you know. It also, this is important for us as Plainfield, it permits the school district, if you are a self-insurer, that if your insurance spikes because you had some abnormal requests, you can account for that in the reason why you need to have more money, or if it didn't spike, you save money lower. We're doing so well with our e-chip, and I'm very proud of that. We've gotten a lot of positive, that it's just that you can't exclude those kinds of things, because it is a self-insurance situation means it could spike the next year. If they force you to cut it 1 year and then you have 3 blood-borne issues, you could be through the roofs. We do have a stop loss in our insurance. So, and it also requires the State Department of Ed to compile for and provide all the MBR calculations to any school district and to make it available. So if you now have questions, you're now going to be able to find it on the website. The more important substantial ones that relate to the conversation today is one, there's the 2% law that says basically if it's unexpended education funds, it can be kept in a non-lapsing. That can collect for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden you have some special ed students who came in. You don't have to use special ed excess, you can use the funds that you stored. So it's non-lapsing and it's restricted only for education. So you're promising the voters that they voted it, that money is not only for anything other than education. I personally like that one. I wonder why. And the last one is, which I think is also good, when we get into these modes where we're worried about our finances, it now requires each Board of Education, each quarter, to post its current and projected expenses and revenue on its website, and to submit a copy of these expenses and revenue to the municipal legislative body or Board of Selectmen as applicable. Which we do anyways, because every month, if you come to our meeting, we have a full disclosure on where we are in our projection. And we've always given it to Kelly whenever she's required it in the past when she was here. The issue is, it's now a formal requirement quarterly for these reports to be given and be provided both on a website and also for the Board of Finance and for the town. So you can monitor the expenses. In summary, I just can tell you that I would hope that what we're doing is just giving you the information that you can deliberate on. We know that what happens if you choose to make the cut. We know that we will find the numbers. It's so early in the year. I can make cuts anywhere. I just wouldn't make a programmatic cut. The board would do that. We wouldn't say no after-school program, I need 64, because that would be unfair. Things could happen October, November, December. We would take it from anticipated costs or anticipated savings. The money will be done if that's what we need. If, however, you feel that you can sustain it because the appropriation is justified and the voters did it, we thank you. If you ask us to consider how we can save that money, and you are gonna put in a set aside, I think that's a possible option for you to consider. And I hope you feel that it's been informative and not trying to direct it, because the choice is yours. We'll do whatever the Board of Finance and the town feels is necessary.
Thank you, Ken. I know that when it comes to the posting of the budget, I appreciate you mentioning that information, because that is something you probably remember at some previous meetings. We've talked about wanting a little more consistency with that. You know, we've had periodic updates, but actually making a point where I'll put it on the agenda and, you know, let's get a little more detailed information out to the board members about expenses. Not just during, of course, the budget season when we go into, you know, in depth, but throughout the course of the year, I think. You know, we'll get in the habit of doing that.
And I just would say towards that, if we also do what's called a line transfer, because you know that ours is a bottom line, but when the board votes, even if it's not quarterly, I would suggest we should send it to the town finance director, because the adjustments just mean that if you thought you were gonna spend 14 million on salaries and you only need 13.8, where did you put the 200,000? I mean, the bottom line will stay the same, but I think it would be good for the town and the Board of Finance to know that a savings here helped to offset maybe transportation. Happy to answer questions and happy to go back to my seat.
Yep,
So,
questions?
yep, so Ken, my problem with this is, when we went through the budget season, I pulled out the CCM numbers that said the governor was gonna give us a $114,000 cut. Here we are today with a $114,000 cut, and I went back and watched the videos, and the words you used were, if there was an ECS cut, the Board of Ed would honor the ECS cut. Here we are today with a $114,000 cut.
Right.
You know, but, you know, in here, in this letter, you have, well, the voters approved this, the voters approved that. And that was my point back then, is we were putting out numbers that, yep, the state budget was not finalized, but they were sitting there right in front of us. And this is my whole problem with this, is they were there, and we didn't put them out like I asked. Everybody else, I get it, that's why we have votes, but this is the issue I have. The taxpayers weren't given the proper information when the vote originally came down. And, you know, and that's my problem with this right now. Is we should have done 114,000 right off the bat.
If I may,
Yep.
at that point in time, it was all guesstimate of what the state would and would not be doing. And if we had gone that route,
Mm-hmm.
we would have violated MBR if in fact it had not been.
And then we could have given you the $114,000 out of the general fund, which is what
Well,
my point was.
If you remember though correctly, we had to also prove to the state that we would not be in violation. And so we had to stay with that number.
But we were going, that was for the next year. The thing was, it was sitting there right in front of us, Christie. I mean, come on. I said it during the meetings. I went back and I watched the 3 videos. I said it over and over and over again. For 9 straight years, we followed what CCM said. This year, we decided to totally avoid CCM because it was a cut. That was my point through the whole budget season. That's the problem I've got with this whole thing. We, again, did not do right by the taxpayer.
See, personally though, as a parent and board member, I can tell you that being at MBR, minimum budget requirement, it is the minimum. And we are at the minimum in our schools. And it also begs the question, are we doing the best for our children using a minimum?
And are we doing right by the taxpayers that cannot do tax raises? Who can't afford to buy their medicine because they continually pay more in taxes? So are we doing right by those citizens? Hey, I sent 3 kids through this school system. They all came out great. I've got 3 grandchildren getting ready to go. One of them just started this time. I'm just looking, you gotta look at both sides. We cannot look just at the fact that we're gonna save the minimum. We also have to look out for the taxpayer who can't afford it.
We also have to look out for the children as well.
You have to look out both ways. And as I had a discussion with you and Ken after the last meeting, the town's just as culpable in this. If you look, when we get into the numbers later, the town's not budgeting properly. When you have a $950,000 where you can cut in expenses, that means you're not budgeting properly. Because, and if that was shortened up, you know what? That leaves more money for the Board of Ed to use. So my suggestion to Ken is, he should be getting with the Board of Selectmen, make them tighten up their budget, and that leaves more money for the Board of Education. That's the way it should work, that's the way it works in business. I have budgets at mine, when I need something, I go to the other guy who needs money. And we share money in that instance. This is the way it's gotta work. The town's gotta tighten up, and they can't have a 10%, 11%, 12% over budgeting. It's called padding your budget. So that's where Ken has to get with the Board of Selectmen and sit down and make sure that the budgets are right. And then you would have that money.
So, as you pose the question, with all due respect, I want to put a little bit of the reference. For 3 months, we were told there'd be a $600,000 cut, and it was asked of us more than once, 2 and 3 times, how will you make a $600,000 cut if the governor makes that? We told you we did not expect it because all of the legislators told us it would not be $600,000. It only was in the last 2 months they reduced it to 114, but they didn't actually make that a vote. So as the chair said, we only could project and we could not say that it was accurate 114. That's why when the $50,000 was cut, we said it's not an issue. We knew that we would be within the MBR. When you say that it's a detriment to the taxpayers, I don't believe so, because we're here today telling you if you need the 64, they don't get hurt, because the issue is if you take it, it goes back. I understand what you said and that you felt you had a frame of reference. What we asked the Board of Finance and what we asked the public to do is to accept the fact that there is a variability, it's 114, we took 50, and the 64,000 will be addressed. And we're here today in September offering to do it. I don't see any lack of good faith on our part. I don't see any lack of good faith that you're not going to give the money back to the taxpayers now or at the end of the year if you decide to put it in a fund. So I think that we showed you we were accurate, that if you make this decision, we will make the adjustment as necessary. I don't see where we misrepresented it or the public. The costs that we gave you in our budget are accurate. I mean, we are going to spend that money. It's the revenue that was different, and if we have to make the cuts, I'd rather make it in September after I know my students than to make it back in May and say I'm not going to run a program. So I just think there's a difference in the reference of you did make a decision, you stood and you had your right to stand in the difference, but in fact the board made a decision and we're ready to live with the adjustment if you give it to us. I don't think the taxpayer will be hurt in this, not on our side.
Ted, Dave, any comment, questions?
I have questions. Sure. First off, that one option where we put the money in the locked fund, whatever it is.
Yes.
After you're going through your presentation, I kind of came up with it. That money comes in at the end of the fiscal year.
Whatever is left over.
Whatever's left over.
Instead of
It's
going
not
into the
up
fund
front.
balance, it can go. It's your option. It can go into a restricted
Okay,
set aside.
so it could go into the restricted fund?
Yes.
Or if you're
Or the
left
fund
over,
balance.
it's a decision at that point which bank account to put it in.
Correct.
Okay. So then you would have that for future use.
You would.
What's required for you to pull that out of there to use it?
It has to be a request of the Board of Ed. Like, you can't just say, I think we need a truck. The Board of Ed would have to come to you and say, we'd like to use it for this purpose. Or you could say, in your budgeting for next year, we'd like you to access that money. And as long as it's a Department of Education expense, a Board of Ed expense, it's a legitimate use for the expense.
Okay, so the money has to go back to the education
Has to go back to
in
education.
some form.
It does. It's
So-
called a restricted set
Yes,
aside and not
yes.
lots.
Exactly. So then, for you to pull it out, you would just pull it out, process you have to go through.
It's in your set aside. We have to ask you for that money. You just have to justify that it's an education
Okay.
expense.
It would be
The Board of Finance
requested
releases all money to the board.
Okay,
Right.
okay. And year, this, say there's 70K left.
Yeah.
And we put it in that unrestricted fund. How does that affect the MBR now?
The MBR is based on the allocation you gave.
Okay.
So if it's $35,930,000, next year it's $35,930,000. So if you were to give us, if you said you're going to be flat funded $35,930,000, you still can use the money in the reserves against that because we're getting that revenue. The amount of the appropriation cannot go down. Where the revenue comes from can come from fund balance, restricted funds, grants, it can come from any way you want. The appropriation is what.
Understand?
Yep.
If you fall short during the year, and you say, I need this money, now we're authorizing more funds, does that increase the MBR? You know what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
we're actually funding you more than budget.
Correct. And that's a question we have to follow through on. If you actually increase the appropriation, the way I believe it works is the way the special ed excess does. It's your money, you just pay that bill from that fund, so it doesn't raise ours.
Okay. Because
Remember that discussion?
it's back to an authorization,
That's
and
right.
you've given more money now.
Yeah, it's money you don't put into the account, you pay for it from the account. So that it would basically create, like we did with special ed excess, we reduced our budget by $300,000, because you're gonna use part of that from the special ed excess. It's not in our budget, it's not in our NBR, which is how it's designed, but we have access to that money.
Yeah, it's a
But
large
our-
fund as well.
Right, we're not at 36 million two, we're at 35 million nine, but 300,000 is waiting in the special ed excess. That's the way that money would work. So it kind of protects the MBR, but it
Yeah,
needs to
because
be.
we don't want to sit there and put ourselves into a situation where we didn't know.
Right.
You know, we've raised our MBR, we were short already to start with this year.
Good.
Next year's it's going to be worse.
Good questions, I understand the thinking. Some of my colleagues, like Killingly, they had a non-lapsing development account, they built it up to over $250,000, so when they did have those special ed kids move in, they said, well, we have that money, you don't have
Fund
to come back to us,
transfer,
you don't have to come for a referendum, we just come.
Okay, those are good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a lot to take in, I don't expect people are gonna say a rendition, but I thought having the information would help. If there are no questions. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Next item, item B, update on open FOI request. I have been in communication with Mr. Kevin Cunningham, and he's been very forthcoming of updates, particularly in the past year, and I know that's something that we had talked about is FOIs going out. Two things we talked about, I remember the last meeting. One is making sure to include Board of Finance, because originally on some of these, when they first started, and even going back as far as January, we weren't included on it. Of course, we knew about them, but it helps to be included, especially in back and forth communication. So, so that was one point. The other point was, as far as following up on them, we wanted to make sure that they're done in a reasonable time frame. And that was something that we had talked about at the last meeting, and, you know, as far as what is a reasonable time frame, you know, it all depends as far as what the severity of the situation is and also who is currently working on it. I know that between our acting finance director and our first select woman, they both have been working on different ones as far as looking for updates, and again, some more time consuming than others. So I put this on here, again, for anything at this point that we could share with the Board of Finance and the public on those updates.
So, last month, Mr. Troward suggested that there be a 4-month response period. So it takes 4 business days for us to respond to the initial FOIA request. Beyond that, I'd say 4 weeks was a reasonable time period to get the ball rolling, to get correspondence, to kind of schedule when these can be satisfied. That doesn't mean they would be satisfied within a 4-month period, just that a schedule or a time frame could be set to where we could satisfy each request. And we've done so over the last month with certain FOIA requests, and I'm sure we can address those at another period of time with the individuals who are coming forth with those FOIA requests. But for the purpose of the Board of Finance, I can't really say, or any FOIA request that's directed towards the Department of Finance. One, loop in Board of Finance on all those requests, just to create or ensure that there's some type of consistency with a response. And two, to make sure that the 4-week period is respected with the Department of Finance and the Board of Finance. We can't really speak on any FOIA requests on the rest of City Hall, but as far as a 4-week period in response and correspondence initiated, that's an easy ask. We can definitely create correspondence and make sure that there's a time frame in which each response is received and satisfied. That makes sense?
Scott, I know that there was several that, of course, have been in queue of getting followed up on. Was there any one specifically that you wanted to bring up?
No, it was just questions. I do have a question though. So if any Board of Finance member asks for documentation, I know there's a 50-cent charge per page, but how is the town gonna handle, like, if I ask for the paperwork for the next subject, like, I wanna see the USDA grant, I wanna see all the quotes for it, is the town gonna charge me 50 cents? Because technically, who people I've consulted with, they shouldn't because I'm a town official, so how's the town gonna handle that? I mean, I'll pay the 50 cents a page, but I'm just saying, I probably should.
I have a question. Is the board requesting it or are you individually requesting it?
Me as a Board of Finance member,
But is the board requesting,
me as a Board of Finance
the
member.
board would have to vote?
No, he's made it clear as far as how he's requesting it, and I mean, it's a good point as far as, if there was any particular issue that any one of us wanted to dig deeper on, and obviously get more information on. How
I think if the board wants it, they should get it for free.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody individually and the rest of the board doesn't really care about it, then they should pay.
So Ron, is that something we'll have to,
Yeah, I think on the surface, it sounds like a good idea. I think that's a privilege that should be afforded to members of the Board of Finance, but I think we should probably, before we make a definitive answer on anything, we should probably take a step back and address it at a later time. It's hard to say yes right away to anything, but on the surface, it sounds good.
Yeah, well, because like I said, because I want to see all the paperwork that belongs to number C, so let us see when the time comes.
well, and the other thing I think about too is, if Scott, wants to, head up, one of this as far as getting it, I would certainly be willing to just lead up, we can do it at a meeting, lead up and look at a meeting, we don't all need to go individually and get.
Right.
our own.
I think that might be the best way forward, but, be able to discuss it and go over the documents together, but, I think that's something we can discuss and try and figure out all the variables that type of request comes with, because I think a blanket statement right now satisfying that might create more problems for us down the road.
No, it's fine.
Anything else from the members on the FOI requests?
I guess I know you talked 4-week time frame. I think that's reasonable. Is that going to be communicated with the person requesting?
Absolutely.
I mean, like a meeting or an official, it's an email, something like, here's our reason, so they can respond to it and say, I think that's unreasonable, and you have to come to terms at that point.
Absolutely.
Is that how it's gonna
That's
be?
part of the reason for looping up the Board of Finance.
Right.
Members of the Board of Finance can help the 4-week time period accountable.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, moving on to item C. Update on the town meeting appropriating the $27,346.25 from contingency fund for door and alarm upgrades and repair at the town's police department pending the reimbursement from USDA. Reason I put this on is because a number of citizens that I talked to at that meeting had asked me a couple questions. One was as far as knowledge about the special meeting. About a week prior to that town meeting, there was of course a special Board of Selectmen's meeting, which I think was at like 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, which I didn't know going into that, besides it being posted, meaning I didn't know, like obviously weeks prior to that was going to happen. And when I did find out about it, like everyone else did on the board and such, I personally couldn't take the time off from work to make it to it. So that was kind of a surprise there. But then moving forward, we of course went to the town meeting. So the question that was presented to me, and I know other Board of Finance members as well, was when were we advising this? When was this brought to the Board of Finance's attention that this was going to be moving to a town meeting? And of course, it didn't go before the Board of Finance prior to that. So what I want to do is to give our first select woman an opportunity to just, as a follow-up on that, based on the results, I know it is what it is, it's the town meeting already happened, but if you could just kind of.
So, really, it didn't have to go to a town meeting, and I explained this at the town meeting so everybody understands this. The contingency fund was approved, so it did go to the Board of Finance, because the Board of Finance approves the budget to go to the town to be approved. So the contingency fund was already gone to the Board of Finance, approved through the Board of Finance, went to the town to be voted on, and was approved in the town budget. So a contingency fund, so everybody is very clear, is a reserve fund for anything, any other expenditure that is not in your operating budget. So when you have a grant, you don't always know in budget season, I'm gonna apply for grants, I don't know if it's a 50-50 grant, if it's a 100% grant. So that is what a contingency fund is for. Our contingency fund, since I've been on Board of Finance and since I've been first selectman, has always been $50,000. If we use that contingency fund for a specific amount, you don't have to go and have that approved a second time because it's already been approved by the Board of Finance and voted on by the people.
So I have a question for that. Kevin asked you at the special meeting, were there any contingency funds expended yet? You said, no, there was nothing. Under this report here, there's $19,000 expended, which I believe would be the annex grant?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's go back to after Kelly Vachon was terminated, we went through the expenditures for that, and it was said that $14,000 and whatever change was left over was going to be expended out of the 2020 contingency fund. So now we're at 19,000, plus we're at 14,000 plus, so we're at 33,000, and we just spent 27,000. We're over the 50,000.
No, not necessarily. I hear what you're saying. On the surface, that makes sense, but of the $19,000 that has already been expensed, 50% is going to be reimbursed.
It doesn't matter. You got it in the line. That money's going to go back into the general fund.
Well, it's accounted for. We have to account for it as an expense,
Doesn't work that way.
and it's going to come back to the town, and that's how we move forward with that. We're getting the funds back, so essentially, it's a 50% reimbursement, as is the 27,000.
So
So the 27,000, to be clear, is 100% reimbursed.
Correct.
That's
And
fine,
And
but
that's
you-
once, I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt, but the only way we can get reimbursed on the 27,000 is after it's expensed
Yep.
to prove, and the USDA will give us that money back.
But the money's going to fall into the general fund. You're not, so you have a line item that is already now at $60,000. Because I don't care whether you're getting the $10,000 back on the grant. That money is going to fall into the general fund. You can't just wipe it off the line item. And you can't wipe it off the line item in the report. So I get what you're saying, but you are now over the $50,000 limit. So yes, it should have gone to the Board of Finance.
No, we're not over the 50,000.
Yes, you are.
No, we are not.
Then where did Kelly's $14,000 go?
So Kelly's $14,000 was the previous budget. We are
Negative.
in the new budget.
I have it on tape, and I went through it, and some of it was spent in the 2019 budget, and there's $14,000 left over we put into the 2020 contingency fund budget. Thank you, Art, for taping the these meetings, because it's right on video. We are overexpended in the contingency line item now.
I will check on that, but I don't.
Oh, don't worry, I got the video queued up, so. It's been done, so we're at $60,000 in the contingency line item now.
We're not running over, we're
You're
planning on
over.
getting those funds back.
It doesn't matter, you're over. You are over. Because you cannot wipe it off the line item as an expense. You expended the money out of the contingency fund, so we are now over. And the other scary thing is, we are 2.5 months into the season, into the budget season, and we've used our contingency fund.
In terms of
But
overall.
that $27,000 comes back. As soon as you send the invoice, that gets reimbursed.
But it doesn't,
I hear where you're coming from, but I think that if you look at the big picture in terms of overall operating budget, those funds are not going to be expensed. For that specific line item, you can say that there's an overage. It depends on how you look at it, and I appreciate where you're coming from.
because
on
you're
that.
going to have to make a line item transfer.
Well, I don't.
You have to.
And if you're understanding where the funds are coming from, the line item transfer should be a non-issue.
But you have to make a line item transfer.
And that's non.
But I'm just saying.
It's done every year.
But Ted, so you, Ted, you just gotta let the spending keep happening. Seriously. Are you gonna just let the spending continue to happen?
That is not spending, that
It
is
is spending.
100% reimbursed. How do you call
You
that
went
spending?
over a line item, and that should have gone in front of the Board of Finance, so you're wrong.
No, you're
All
wrong.
right, but, all right, okay, please.
I'll bring the lawyer who
No
told me
more
that you
back
guys
and
are
forth on
wrong.
this. Hey, Ted, did you have anything else? Because I started listening to you there, but then kind of got.
No, what I just said, all I'm trying to say is that it's not unusual to spend money from one account to the other, and at the end of the year, we reconcile the
Yeah,
differences.
and where
We
did,
have 20 or 30 items of that nature for the last 20 years, 30 years, okay?
so Ted, when's the last time you had to fund the contingency? Where does the funding usually come from? It usually comes from the contingency line item. We don't put money into the contingency, we always take it out of the contingency line item.
Well, it has to get there, Scott. The only way you got a contingency fund, we put it there.
Yeah, there's a $50,000 budget for it, not a $60,000 budget, Ted.
Right. But that,
Right, so every year, when we go to
would
do the
you
line item
agree that
transfers.
we have over expenditures in other areas in the budget?
Yeah,
Okay, that's common, is what I'm
but not in the
saying.
contingency
And in
line
the
item,
case
Ted.
where- In the case where we know we're gonna get reimbursed, I don't see the problem.
You can just overspend out of your savings account anytime you want, right?
Yeah. That's
So
what
if you got
it's for.
10,000 in your savings account, you can go spend $20,000 out of it? Jewish City Savings will let you take $20,000 out of your $10,000 savings account,
I
Ted?
don't think you understand. We're being
Oh, I fully
reimbursed.
understand, I do this for a living, Ted. I fully understand.
No, you had something?
All I've done finance transfers, what they're doing is taking, okay, I got a little bit more money in this account, I'm gonna move it to this account, we're not taking it out of contingency.
Right, I fully understand that. But normally, when we did the line item transfers last year, the money was coming out of contingency going into different salaries and stuff. You don't put money back into the contingency, that is backwards. It's backwards.
Well,
Contingency's there for an emergency.
I respectfully disagree because it's not as if we're spending the money not knowing where we're replacing what we're spending.
Pretty scary.
What we're doing is before the money's spent, we know exactly how much is going to be spent because of the reimbursement that's coming back. So it's not irresponsible on our part because we know overall, from the bottom line, baseline budgeting, that we're gonna get the funds back. So we're not running a deficit in any way. Just that particular line item's gonna need a little extra care in the line item transfer. I think that's fairly easy based on past practices and line item transfers, like Ted said.
Glad you guys are okay with them just spending the money away.
I'm okay with it too, Scott.
That's great.
Well, your accounting practice, you're right. It's gonna go from one account to another. I don't disagree with that. What we're doing is we're investing and we're being reimbursed for the investment, which, you're right, it goes into a different account. So now it's not in the contingency fund. And we have gone over, agreed.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
But of that money, 27,000 of that 60 is gonna be sitting in our bank account at the end of the year.
Yep, that's fine, but you're
It's-
still
I
not.
agree then. We're at agreement.
Now, could we get the reimbursement, could we,
Line item transfer back to the
No, no,
contingency.
yeah,
You can't.
yeah. Make it go back.
You can't do that with the general fund, that's not how the general fund works. You can't take money out of the general fund to increase the
You'd have to budget it.
contingency.
Are you talking about the fund
That is
balance?
not
When you
increasing
say
it.
general fund?
So when we
Just
get,
so I'm not confused.
Yes.
Okay, you mean fund balance?
Yeah.
Not general fund?
Right.
Okay.
we're not increasing it though, Scott, because when we get that $27,000 back from USDA, it goes into the general fund.
Right.
All we do is take that 27,000 that we took from the contingency account, we come to you, we ask you to please put that money, transfer it back into our contingency fund. We're not taking money from our general fund extra.
Right. We're not
It's
overspending.
money that we
You're overspending.
Hey,
No, no,
here-
we're
getting free
I
services.
just out of curiosity, these are programs that are needed, and if we didn't take it from the contingency fund, would you recommend another line item that we
No,
expense?
I just recommend you come to us and ask us to take it out of the fund balance. Because that's where the money's gonna go back to. But you wanna know what that would have required, Ron? That would have required a meeting.
But
So to take it out of contingency, because she's right, it's in the budget. If you had come, if the Board of Selectmen had come to us and said, we need to take $27,000 out of the fund balance to pay for this, and we're gonna be reimbursed, it would have required a town meeting.
But this
To
is,
But why
skate, to
would
skate
you want
around,
to
to
take
skate
it-
around the town meeting, they decide to go through the contingency fund
That has
because
nothing
it's
to
in.
do with
I think-
going around to town
Yes, it
meeting
does.
stuff. The money is in the contingency account. why take those extra steps when it's been approved?
Then
That
why did
doesn't
you, then
make
Kathy,
sense.
then, yeah,
I don't
okay,
think
so
we're
then why did you
getting
take,
Yeah.
then why did you take the extra step to have the town meeting?
Yeah,
Well, I'll say this, Tom, if you're gonna continue to allow this type of spending to happen, we got an issue,
that's fine.
because it's not right.
All right, there's no other questions or discussion. Moving on to item D. Discuss and act upon the unclaimed property tax revenue that the town will be receiving from the state that Mr. Dan Real actually brought to our attention, and that could be utilized for certain items. And we had talked in the past about it being used possibly to purchase signs, reminder signs to go out and vote, because that is something that a lot of people have asked about. I know in the recent primary, thanks to Mr. Charlwood, there were reminder signs about the Republican primary that went out. So that was an example of what a lot of citizens would like to see here, not just for a Republican primary, but for a couple different things. Obviously, November election day, regardless of what year it is and what type of election's going on, presidential, local elections. But the other thing too is people have asked me it'd be better to have some reminder signage out for the budget season. We're voting the budget. Just a reminder, but it's a pretty important vote. Not everybody pays as close attention to it as the rest of us. So that I thought was a good idea when we had talked about it a while back. What I put it on here to discuss was I wanted to find out from Ron, where do we stand with receiving that money and how much is it again that we're receiving?
It's roughly $1,200 that we're getting from the state treasurer's office. And in terms of processing that fund, it's a 90-day period from the moment they receive all the information from us. And right now, we're in that 90-day period. And from what I understand, there's another 2 weeks on top of that 90 days that we should get the funds. So I'm guessing we're going to get funding somewhere late November, early December. But the plan is to have the town clerk's office purchase the signage in time for election season, and then be reimbursed as soon as the funds come in.
Okay. So
The
that's
signs-
what,
Some signs have been ordered.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We're in the process of getting things.
okay. So what we could act upon, hence why I put that on there, was out of that 1,200 that Ron says was getting, do we want to see a certain amount of that or the whole thing go towards the signage? To me, I don't know that it's going to necessarily require 1,200. I think for however many signs Scott got, I think he said it was like, what, 140 or 150?
144 for 50 signs.
Yeah,
That was
so-
without stakes, I didn't buy stakes because I already had mine.
Right, so, but the point is, I mean, being, around 150, even if you're spaced out like 200, I mean, it's probably not gonna require the signs that we're looking at getting the whole $1,200. So, would the board, again, wanna see it all go towards that, or a certain amount of it go towards signage?
Well, you definitely need several sets of signs. You need some for the referendum and you need some for general election.
What's the, item E, what's that gonna cost us?
No, haven't gotten there yet, so, don't have that.
What can we, as far as I'm concerned, it's gonna be some cost, my guess is over 1,200, I would put it in item E.
Okay, well, we can do that too, certainly. Yeah, there's nothing that says that unclaimed revenue that we're getting has to go towards signage, but like I said, I thought that was a good idea when it first came up.
Very good idea, except computers are more important.
So, yeah, if the board does not want to make a motion to direct that money, we do not have to. We just wanted to put it out there as an option.
I motion we allocate $300 at this point of that money to the signs.
Okay.
That would be for any elections or primaries or voting on the budget whenever we have to put signs out so we can alert the town. Small elections, they don't see. Budget, people forget about.
Are you sure that's not too small of a number? I mean, say we go over that, and I mean, I'm just speaking, hypotheticals. I mean, are we handcuffing ourselves with that small number? And
How do we
not-
buy them now?
Say again.
How do we buy them now?
Well, we're using with the.
I mean,
Right.
we buy them now. This is additional money included into what we already spent.
I'm not tracking, I'm sorry.
Right now, we buy signs. I don't know, what do we spend? I have no idea.
And that's exactly my point.
$100,
That's the point I'm
$500.
getting at. I'm not exactly sure if.
I don't know the cost of it.
Right.
I'm going off of Scott, he's a trusted source on that.
Primary signs, where did they come, because I've never seen them before.
Primary signs, I bought them,
Yeah.
So we call them primary signs?
Mhm.
You pay for them?
yep, because I wanted people to know,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
otherwise they wouldn't have known.
So I say maybe 50% might be a better number for that allocation, maybe 600, just to be safe, so we don't handcuff ourselves with a $300 lower number, that's around 25%. It's a
Can I-
suggestion.
Yeah,
Can I
Yeah.
just say something? I think what David is trying to say is that he's saying that they would like to give $300 to signs. It doesn't mean that we can't spend more than $300.
Exactly.
Because we
We're not
already purchased
handcuffed,
signs.
we're handcuffed from this money,
Right,
Right.
but not from the budget.
right.
Understood.
And that's why I asked the
Because we
question, how
already
much was
purchased
I
signs.
understand now, I apologize.
Okay.
All right.
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion, a second, to take $300 out of that $1,200 to put towards signage, and that, of course, doesn't include what is already being looked at for spending on signs, reminder vote signs. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.